Hi everybody, welcome to A Course in Miracles Applied. Today's topic is called the fear of release. This is from the whole sentence that this comes in, or this appears, is in chapter 2, section 5, paragraph 1, and it's the first sentence. And it says, before miracle workers are ready to undertake their function in this world, it is essential that they fully understand the fear of release. And I want to start with a little exercise. If you want to, if you have time and the means right now, to write down or think about a couple of things that bother you. Maybe you have an issue with a coworker or your boss or somebody at work. Maybe there's a health issue, and maybe there's a financial issue or a relationship issue. If you just think about a couple of those and keep those in your mind for this for the duration of this segment. So the fear of release is one of those topics that go through or permeate everything that the Course teaches. In one way, shape, or form, everything comes back to that fear of release, right? Jesus says in the Course that you have but two emotions, love and fear, right? One was given you and one you made up. And anything that, or everything that isn't love, must be fear. And that fear is always the fear of release. And if you look at this sentence, I don't know about you, but when I first read this, before miracle workers are ready to undertake their function in this world, it is essential that they fully understand the fear of release. The first time I read it, I thought it meant the fear of release of the other person that the miracle worker comes in contact with, right? This has since then changed to first both, that it is meant for the other person and for ourselves. And now I'm really mostly concerned about my own fear of release, because that I'm kind of the gatekeeper of the love that then extends into the world. And if the fear of release is gone, then the love can flow through me to the other person, and it doesn't matter what the other person, what the issue is the other person has, because the love that flows through me at that point will automatically be expressed in the way that the other person can understand. So the fear of release is basically, in my view, it is the fear of the Course student to be released. And so I'm gonna just underline this here. So the fear of release is the issue. And one of the questions is, release to what, right? You could also ask, release from what? And release from what is from the ego. And we are released towards something. The Course says you're not saved from something, you're saved for glory. I don't know if it's saved, right? It is for something, it's not from something, because if you say from something, if you say you're saved from the ego, that means the ego is real, right? You're saved for glory, so that you can reestablish your awareness of the love that is within us. So we are released for or into something, right? And first one would be love. You could say peace. God. Right? So the release, the fear of release into love, into peace, and into God. That is the fear. And there are a couple of words in this sentence that kind of fall by the wayside when we first read it, right? Myself included. You could say the word essential, right? It is essential to fully understand the fear of release. So in any course student's life, there must come a point where this is being addressed. And I think it's being addressed in the beginning a little bit, and then we're just gonna do our work, and then once we get a little deeper into the ego thought system, then it comes back up again, and then it's really what Jesus says, essential that we understand the fear of release. I think it is one of the most important concepts in the course to understand within ourselves, because that is what makes forgiveness possible. The understanding of our fear of release. That also makes it clear that when we, as course students, and Ken spoke about that a lot when he was talking about somebody was in the hospital and another course student would go in and say, hey, why don't you just let the sickness go? Don't you know that this is a defense against the truth? As lesson 136 says, you can just get up and leave the hospital, right? Or we could maybe say to somebody, you can just snap out of it, right? Or stop that. Stop being addicted, stuff like that. And I think for that, just for that also, it is essential that we understand the fear of release. Because as we have in our own practice, hopefully come to a point where we realize we can't just do anything, right? In the beginning, maybe we can just change our mind about somebody, but the further we go down the road, the more, the harder it seems to get, and we can't just go to the Holy Spirit. There's a reason why the ego thought system has been so successful with us, and we're so fully attached to it, right? So that reason is so deeply ingrained within us that we can't just simply say, hey, I'm just going to be from now on the Holy Son of God, right? If that were possible, why would we even need the course, right? There's no need for it. So when Jesus says it is essential that we understand the fear of release, he kind of tells us to be to have caution within ourselves and with others, that we don't hit them over the head with course theory, right? And ourselves included. The other words, while we're at it, right? Fully understand. That's interesting, because there's no way we can fully understand this fear of release until we have actually experienced it and have gone past it. So in this sentence, the timing that Jesus gives us is more poetic than true, right? Because he says, before miracle workers are ready to undertake their function in the world, you have to understand the fear of release. So that means before we would be ready to do anything in this world that helps somebody else, we would first have to fully understand the fear of release, which is obviously not the case. We can't fully understand it for a long time. We can start getting glimpses of that fear of release within ourselves, we might see it then in others a little bit more. And slowly but surely we get to a point where we start to begin to understand that fear of release, which makes us a little bit more forgiving towards others, kinder towards others and ourselves. But we're going to get to that. So what I think happens is we do what we do in the world, right? And parallel to that, we begin to understand that fear of release and how big that is and how we can't really dismiss it. Just like we should not dismiss the ego. I always say, or Ken always said, you should have a healthy respect for the ego, because it is very powerful, not because of itself, but because of the power we gave it. The Son of God gave the ego power, and the ego uses that power, which is it's powerful, to then imprison the Son of God. But it's our own power that we have given the ego. But to dismiss it would mean we would dismiss our own power. So there's this fine line between trying not to make it real and not giving it a lot of power. But we can basically work from the assumption that we have already given the ego 100% of our power. We are fully committed to the ego, right? I think that's a very good baseline, and from there we and Jesus together can then start the process of looking at the ego with love next to us, and then that starts the forgiveness process that goes over the years and decades on our journey. And the end result would be our release into God, into peace, and into love, right? But this is a long process. This isn't just like, oh yeah, I understand the fear of release. You know, there's a lot to it, not theoretically, but emotionally and experientially within us. There's a lot of fear for that release. In fact, the Course says that two things. One is that all the emotions in the world, the different emotions in the world, right? The different forms of fear, the different forms fear take, are really only one fear, right? Any emotion that we have, behind it is fear. So eventually they will all funnel into one, which is fear, and that fear is the fear of love, of peace, of God, of release into that. But that's the end of our journey to when it all comes together, right? When all the different emotions, we realize this is all just fear, and what's behind fear is that fear of release into love. There's one sentence before we go to our main chapter. Let me think what that's called. Yeah. There's one, there are two lines in in chapter 26, section 8, the immediacy of salvation, which underscore this fear of release. This is in paragraph 4, in sentence 3 and 4. It says, future loss is not your fear, but present joining is your dread. Right? Future loss is not your fear, but present joining is your dread. And Jesus says in those two sentences that we are not afraid of anything in the future. Right? Even if this future is 1 second from now, anything we experience as fear from or of something in the future is not fear of the future. The ego has this trick where it tells us your fear is based in the world, right? In the financial sector, in the political sector, in your health, with relationships, in war and peace. The ego tells us we are afraid of something in the world, like a spider or a virus or something, right? Or death. But we're not afraid of that. Present joining is your dread, right? Presently joining, that is our dread. That's the same as understanding the fear of release. We are afraid of joining, of being released into the love that is there. The Course says the love in the Son's mind is the only reality in this world. Everything else is an illusion that is made up by us, right? So the love is the constant. But we dread being aware of this love. Otherwise, we would experience it, right? If we would not dread, meaning if we would not be afraid of love right now, at this very moment, we would experience it. There's no time delay. It's not like God says, oh, no, you have to go to the end of the process and then you can feel love, or whatever it is. There's nothing that prevents us from experiencing love and peace and the presence of God or Jesus within us right now, other than our fear of being released into it. And if you go back to the 3 problems from the beginning, in whatever area of our lives they are just all an expression of that fear of release, right? Without the fear of being released, those problems would not be there. We purposefully hold on to the problem so that we don't feel the love and the peace of God within us and Jesus, right? It is an active process. And just see here. Another way of explaining all this, and I think it's the best way that is in the Course, it's so clear, is in chapter 13, the guiltless world. For me, the guiltless world, that chapter it is so stuck full of anything that has to do with that fear and with our guilt that is the cause for that fear. It's, I think, the most amazing chapter for me in the whole Course, and specifically in this one would be the fear of redemption, which is the 3rd section 3, the fear of redemption. And I just want to go through it a little bit, a couple of sentences here and there, to flesh this out really well, so that we have a really good understanding of that fear of redemption coming from Jesus himself, right, in the Course. It says in the first line, first paragraph, so that is chapter 13, section 3, paragraph 1. It says, "You may wonder why it is so crucial that you look upon your hatred and realize its full extent. You may also think that it would be easy enough for the Holy Spirit to show it to you and to dispel it without the need for you to raise it into awareness yourself." Right? We all know this feeling where we say, I remember that for myself. I'm like, why, Jesus, why don't you just take it? Right? Why don't you take my fear away? Why don't you take this conflict away? Why don't you just make it so that I get that check in the mail, so I'm not afraid of the future anymore, right? And we might think it should be easy enough for the Holy Spirit to just take it, right? And the crucial thing here is what Jesus says. You may wonder why it is so crucial crucial and essential, right? We have two, very strong words. Why it is so crucial that you look upon your hatred and realize its full extent. We have to look at the hatred and realize its full extent. And then it says, you may also think that it would be easy enough for the Holy Spirit to show it to you and to dispel it without the need for you to raise it to awareness yourself. So we say, Holy Spirit, why don't you just take it? I don't have to worry about it. I don't want to worry about it. Here, just take it, right? Yet there is one more obstacle you have interposed between yourself and the atonement. In your disordered state, I'm skipping a little bit, in your disordered state of mind, you're not afraid of fear. You do not like it, but it is not your desire to attack that really frightens you. You are not really seriously disturbed by your hostility. You keep it hidden because you are more afraid of what it covers. And that is the core line, what it covers. So if this little thing here is the problem that we have, right? And we say, Jesus, take it from us. If this problem wouldn't cover up something else, we could just say, take it, right? But because this problem, whatever the problem is, it covers up something below it that we're not aware of. That's why we only think, Jesus, please take this. Because we're not aware that it covers something that is below. So we can't open our hands because we are actively choosing to hold it in our hand, to not let it go because of the purpose it has to cover something that is below this, right? You keep it hidden because you are more afraid of what it covers. You could look even upon the ego's darkest cornerstone without fear if you did not believe that without the ego, you would find within yourself something you fear even more. So we can't let go of the ego just like that, because the ego covers something that we're more afraid of than the ego. This is so important. We can go through the whole course and years and years and years of studying and applying. If we don't get this principle, we will always be baffled when we say, why can't I let this go? Why can't I be at peace right now? Right? I'm trying so hard to not have this conflict with my neighbor. Why can't I let it go? And the answer is, we don't want to let it go because we are afraid we will find something within yourself you fear even more, and this problem covers it up. So we don't want to get rid of this problem because then the actual problem would come up, and we don't want that. Right? That's why we want to keep the problem close to our heart. We hug it tight. We hug it to our heart, as the Course says. And then the crucial sentence here, you are not really afraid of crucifixion. Your real terror is of redemption, right? Your real terror is the fear. Your real terror is of release, of redemption. Under the ego's dark foundation, that's the second paragraph, is the memory of God, and it is of this that you are really afraid. The memory of God is what we're afraid of. We're holding this problem in our hand very tight, and officially we say, Jesus, please take this from me. Why? And we ask ourselves, why am I holding on to it? But underneath that, underneath the ego's dark foundation is the memory of God, and it is of this that you are really afraid. So we can't let this go, because if we would let it go, it would open the door to this blackness, which we believe is this blackness in our mind the memory of God, and that is what we're really afraid. And it says, for this memory would instantly restore you to your proper place, and it is this place that you have sought to leave. Your fear of attack is nothing compared to your fear of love. You would be willing to look even upon your savage wish to kill God's Son if you did not believe that it saves you from love. For this wish caused the separation, and you have protected it because you do not want the separation healed. You realize that by removing the dark cloud that obscures it, your love for your Father would impel you to answer his call and leap into heaven. If you imagine, let's take this down to our world, right? In this world. Let's say you're in a room with 5 strangers, right? Or co-workers, whoever it is, doesn't matter. You're in the subway, or you're in a meeting at work, you're in a doctor's office, it doesn't matter what it is. And if we apply now this principle to this scene in front of us, with those people around us, and we say, you realize that by removing the dark cloud that obscures it, your love for your Father would impel you to answer his call and leap into heaven. That means, translated means, because we said love, the love in the Son's mind is the only reality in this world. So when we're in a room with 5 people, the love between us is the only reality in this room. Everything else is made up. And everything else is made with the purpose of not feeling this love. So if we're in a doctor's office, in the waiting room, and we have 10 other patients sitting there, and we're kind of like dreading the whole thing and looking from one to the other, and one is, everybody's kind of sick, and we can't stand it. The only reason why we feel that way is because we're afraid of the love that is underlying it. We don't want to let this go, this judgment, because we're so afraid to be released into this love, and we would experience the love for everybody in the room. But we're too afraid of that. That's why we make up conflicts, we make up judgments with others, so that we don't feel that love. That is the only reason, right? For still deeper than the ego's foundation, and much stronger than it will ever be, is your intense and burning love of God and his for you. This is what you really want to hide. We want to hide that love. We do not want to get in touch with it, and we're going to get to why. But we don't want to get in touch with that love. That's why when we meet somebody, most of the time we immediately put up a wall. We judge, we have a little judgment, which is enough, right, to hold the other person at arm's length or further. We push them away, and then we forget we did it, and we're sitting in this doctor's office or in this meeting, and we feel all kinds of different things, right? We feel a little anxiety, maybe a little bit triumph, or a little upset or judgmental, or whatever it is. But we don't realize that the only reason we're experiencing all that is so that we don't experience the love that is there. Right? The fear of release is essential to realize that. It's essential to realize the fear that we have of each other. We're afraid of the love that underlies everything in this world. The love is not in the world, the love is in our mind, right? But if we would look out onto the others in this room, and we would not need to hide that love any longer, we would feel it. And it would be, at first it would be overwhelming. would be completely unmanageable, because it's not just a little love that is like, oh, this is cute. It is a tidal wave of something that we have tried to not be in touch with if you're in a timeline for millennia, right? Thousands of years were tried to keep this love away from us. So when he says, for still deeper than the ego's foundation, much stronger than it will ever be, is your intense and burning love of God and his for you. This is what you really want to hide. This is what we want to hide, the love that is there. If I project my guilt onto the other person in front of me, what I really want to do is hide the love that is there, because I'm so afraid of it, right? And then he says in paragraph 4, he goes on and on. There's so much in it. I can actually read the whole paragraph. It says, you have built your whole insane belief system, the whole ego, everything in this world, right? Our persona, our identity as this person. We have built this whole insane belief system because you think you would be helpless in God's presence, and you would save yourself from his love because you think it would crush you into nothingness. That's what we're afraid of. We're afraid this love will crush us into nothingness. Nothing of this persona, of this identity, will be left if we would open ourselves up and have ourselves released to love. You are afraid it would sweep you away from yourself and make you little, because you believe that magnitude lies in defiance and attack is grandeur. You think you have made a world God would destroy, and by loving him, which you do, you would throw this world away, which you would. Therefore, you have used the world to cover your love. We have used the world to cover the love that is there. And the deeper you go into the blackness of the ego thought system, the ego's foundation, the closer you come to the love that is hidden there, and it is this that frightens you. And it is this that frightens you is in italics. Right? It's not just a regular sentence, it is in italics. The love that is hidden below the dark foundation of the ego is what frightens us. And now it should become clear why we don't want to approach it. Right? Once it becomes clear that we're afraid of love, that all of our lives, our main purpose is to avoid love as much as we possibly can. From day one, we come out of the womb and we cry. It's like, I don't want love. And then we get upset if somebody doesn't give us love, but we don't want it. We move away from it as far as possible. We have moments of sanity where we let it in, and then we go right back into the ego and we continue on, right? Living lives in quiet misery, right? Or what the phrase is. Everything only because we're afraid to be released. We're afraid to live a life without the ego. And we can't just let it go, because the fear of love is too strong. Theoretically, we could let it go, right? But we're too invested in it. We're too invested in our own belief in sin and guilt, and that is why we're so afraid of love, right? Because of our belief in sin. And then he gives us the solution, right, in paragraph 6. He says, "You must look upon your illusions and not keep them hidden, because they do not rest on their own foundation. In concealment, they appear to do so, and thus they seem to be self-sustained." Right? We believe the ego thought system sits on its own foundation, which is solid. But the solidness is only because we don't look at it. The moment we look at it with Jesus, and the moment can be years, it's not just like a one moment. But the moment we start looking at the ego, we realize it does not rest on its own foundation, because there cannot be a real foundation that says the separation from God is real. Because that would be the foundation. And based on the separation from God is real, then the ego said, and this, my friend, is a sin that you have committed. You have now destroyed heaven because you are a separate individual. The guilt is the next step. We experience a tremendous amount of guilt. We can't handle it. We must project it out. We attack God in a desperate attempt to get rid of the guilt. And then he has the guilt, which means he's the murderer. And that's when the fear of love begins. Because we now believe God has our own qualities, which means we destroyed heaven. We can't handle it. We give that. We split it off. We give it to God. Now God is the destroyer. And we are now afraid of what we made of God, of love. For beneath them, the ego, the illusions, and concealed as long as they are hidden, is the loving mind that thought it made them in anger. Right? So below all those illusions is our mind, our loving mind, and that has made a mistake and thought that we were able to kill God, to shatter unity of heaven, the unity of heaven. Right? That's our only mistake. We thought it's possible to separate from God. The ego says, no, it is possible, because the ego can only live if we give it our power, right? So it tells us it is possible that you can kill God, that you can destroy heaven, and that you can separate. And actually, it has happened. And now we just have to deal with it. We have to deal with the sin and the guilt and the fear, and we have to go into the world and hide there and hide everything and pretend everything is fine. And the pain in this mind is so apparent when it is uncovered that its need of healing cannot be denied. Not all the tricks and games you offer it can heal it, for here is the real crucifixion of God's Son. That pain that we experience, right? Everything, any emotion that we feel is this fear of release. Any pain we feel, in any shape or form, mental pain, emotional pain, physical pain, is the same thing. It is that pain, when it is uncovered that its need of healing cannot be denied. The act of denying God within us, right? The act of hiding ourselves from love, is so utterly painful that we have to take means as many as possible to alleviate it. Be that medication, be that drugs, be that alcohol, be that sex, be that pleasure in the world, going on vacations, or having a lot of money, or whatever it is that we try to alleviate this pain. But we're making a mistake because we're alleviating it, trying to alleviate it in the wrong place, right? We're not uncovering it. We're covering it over, and then we find a solution that obviously doesn't work, right? It works once for a little while, and then we have to do it again and again and again. It's always external. And the Course doesn't suggest not to do those things at all, right? The only thing I think it suggests is to look at it and say, listen, the pain that you think comes from the world doesn't come from the world. It comes from our attempt to hide from love, to push love away. Because we are love, right? We are the part 2 of the workbook, starting at lesson 220, is all about who we truly are, right? The Son of God, and we're holy and all that. And that's what we try to hide. So we try to hide ourselves. We're starving ourselves of this love, right? Because we're so afraid of it. So the pain in this mind is so apparent when it is uncovered that its need of healing cannot be denied. Now, what that also means, unfortunately, I think, is not unfortunately, but there must be a period where we get in touch with this pain, right? In whatever shape we can do that. There's no reason for us to go through this undertaking with the Course if we don't feel that pain, initially at least, because we need to go into that pain for us to become motivated to go to Jesus, right? If we don't come in touch with that pain, it's still covered, and we still think we're fine in this world, right? That's why there's a couple of painful phases in this curriculum that we can't avoid. But the good thing is, whenever we come in contact with that pain, now that we're Course students, we can realize, okay, so this is now part of the uncovering process, right? I don't want to deny that pain anymore. The need of healing cannot be denied, right? I need to at some point go to Jesus and say, this is unbearable. This is unbearable, right? And the further we go into the Course, the lower that threshold is of that pain, right? What we 20 years ago thought, oh, this makes me happy, now, or later, might not make us happy anymore, because we have uncovered already some of those things, some of the pain that was hidden in other things, right, that we couldn't identify. And then in paragraph 8, he says, wait a minute. Paragraph 7. Do not hide suffering from his sight, but bring it gladly to him. Lay before his eternal sanity all your hurt, and let him heal you. Do not leave any spot of pain hidden from his light, and search your mind carefully for any thoughts you may fear to uncover. I think that's another crucial thing, right? If we don't uncover those thoughts, we will never get to the love that lies right below it. For he will heal every little thought you have kept to hurt you, and cleanse it of its littleness, restoring it to the magnitude of God. Behind that thought of littleness is the magnitude of God. So that thought of littleness, in any shape that comes, right, behind that is the magnitude of God. Paragraph 8 says, beneath all the grandiosity you hold so dear is your real call for help. Beneath everything in the ego thought system, right? Everything we do on a daily basis is your real call for help. Because Jesus says your fear of release from his perspective is a call for help, right? He does not see this as something bad, quote unquote. And anything in the ego, right? Any socially unacceptable behavior that anybody expresses in Jesus's eyes is, first of all, he knows it is only because of our fear of release, right? Any politician, any person in a war, anybody that does anything to hurt anybody, it is only because of the fear of release. That's the only reason. We're all in this very same, on this very same level. We express it differently, but the fear of release is what unites us within the ego thought system. Everybody has it. For you call for love to your Father as your Father calls you to himself. That fear of release, when we experience, is the call for love to our Father as our Father calls us to himself. And we want to deny this call that we're getting from God with the fear. The fear is the means for us not to go back. In that place which you have hidden, you will only to unite with the Father in loving remembrance of him, right? That hidden place within us that is below this problem that I'm holding on to, right? That's the memory of God. You will find this place of truth as you see it in your brothers. For though they may deceive themselves, like you, they long for the grandeur that is in them. So we all have this longing within us, expressed in millions and millions of different ways, right? We express this longing, we express this fear of release in so many ways. And with the Course, we begin to learn eventually to see this in others, right? This fear of release that is present in everybody. If you were with me in the room, I would say, do you have any questions? I think the one thing I want to do still is, the last thing would be quickly to do this. We've done it a couple of times in other segments. So the fear that Jesus talks about, the fear of release, right, is the product of our belief in sin and guilt. Right? Because the sin and guilt is too overwhelming. We project it out. That means we attack. The attack is the means of projecting the guilt onto somebody else. And that engenders fear, because we then think it'll come straight back at us. Whatever this guilt is that we now have given to somebody else, now the other person is the victimizer, and I'm now going to be afraid, right? So that's where the fear of release comes from is our attack on God. And it's not the attack on God, because it's impossible to attack God. It is our belief that He reacts in a way. He actually is that fearful entity. And we have many layers of defenses against that. The first one is we're not even aware that we're afraid of God, right? We're not aware of the fear of release at all. That's why Jesus, has those sections in there to make us understand that we are afraid of God and of love, right? But we cover it over so that we don't come in touch with that. The ego's goal is to get us as far away from that insight as possible, because that starts the process of us realizing, hey, eventually we don't need the ego anymore, and we decide for the Holy Spirit, and the ego is done, right? The ego can't have that, so it will try to convince us to say, no, you're afraid of death, right? Or you're afraid of a virus. Whereas in truth, we are afraid of what we made of love. And to go one step further, I should get some Velcro, because the Velcro is a really good example. The ego's fear is that we decide against it eventually, right? This fear the ego has, then it gives us and says, you should be afraid because you attacked God. And because we're so velcroed and mind melted, to speak in Star Trek, with the ego, we experience the ego's fear as our own. Right? So the next level of all of this that we just discussed would be to say that the ego is the thing that is afraid. But because we're so fully identified with the ego, we experience the ego's fear as our own. And the process of the course is to have this Velcro slowly but surely opened up, right? We look at each one with Jesus and say, okay, let's take this apart. Let's look at this situation in my life. Let's look at this relationship. And whenever we look at the ego, we can't be the ego. Right? It makes so much sense. The ego cannot look at itself. We who are not the ego, who are attached to the ego, if we lift a little something up and look at the ego, that part can't be the ego for this 1 second. And if we take Jesus's hand and say, please look at this with me, and we look at our ego with Jesus, and over time, that is the process of disentangling us, disengaging us from the ego. And the way to learn it, one way to learn it is to realize our extent of our fear of love, right? That we're so afraid of love. Because if we begin to realize that our fear is of release, and we spend 10 minutes not watching TV, but thinking about it, and asking ourselves, I'm afraid of love. I'm afraid of Jesus. I'm afraid of the presence that has dictated the course that I'm studying. Right? And that starts a process within ourselves to question the ego. Right? Can this really be that I'm afraid of Jesus? Right? But we have to go from, oh no, I'm not afraid of Jesus, to, wow, I am afraid of Jesus, to then questioning it, the validity of it. And the questioning is always to question the sin and the guilt, right? Can I be guilty, Jesus? And then, as a closing of sorts, taking this whole aspect into our studying the Course. So it says, if the purpose of this Course is to help you remember what you are, and if you believe that what you are is fearful, then it must follow that you will not learn this Course. We talked about that once or twice before, right? We are afraid of what this Course represents. And eventually we must come in contact with that. Each time we close the book, I see that myself, right? I watch TV, I open the book, I'll read a little bit, I close it, and I watch more TV. Because I'm afraid of what this Course tells me, right? I'm afraid of being released to the love, right? The awareness of that is where the Course wants us to be, to become aware of that fear of release. Fully understand that fear of release in us and in ourselves, which includes that if we're afraid of the release, we must be afraid of what the Course tells us. We must be utterly afraid of the words in this book, because the words are just a symbolic messenger of the love that has inspired it. And if we're afraid of love, which we are, we must be afraid of the Course. And eventually there comes a time when we kind of face that, right? We don't want to learn this Course, even though we have dedicated 20, 30, 40, 50 years of our lives to it. Part of us does not want to learn this Course because we're too afraid of where it will lead us. Anyway, I think that's it. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. But I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.